We did have a lot of fun working on that video, and if any of you would like a copy of it, we've had several people around the state, agents and instructors. We have put that video on our website, which is on this rack card that we've given each of you today. Okay? Yeah. You know, there's certainly been a lot of talk about green, and one of the topics in this first chapter on green is a topic called greenwashing. And it says that some manufacturers or builders call their product green just so you'll like it. And we also spoke about third-party verification and the importance of that verification. Let me put my little magic box up here. A couple of years ago, I picked up this package of lights, and it's in this pretty green packaging. And it says, this pack of CFL light bulbs will save you $117 during the lifespan of these 3 light bulbs. What do you think? Do you think that's true, or do you think that's just another example of a manufacturer doing some greenwashing?
Greenwashing.
Cheryl says it's greenwashing.
What's the span of time?
Okay. Well, that's why we're going to have a third-party verifier here today. Miss Kim, if you'll come up and stand right here, please. All right. So I'm going to shine, just stand in front of the side of our box, please, Kim. I'm going to shine some lights in your eyes. You may want to glance off to the side, but in this box of lights, we have 2 light bulbs. One is the Sylvania 65-watt compact fluorescent light bulb, and the other is a Sylvania 65-watt regular incandescent light bulb. Now, the incandescent light bulb, that's the dinosaur. That's going to be a thing of the past. That's the one that Thomas Alva Edison invented. The compact fluorescent is just kind of a stopover on the way to LED light bulbs. The LEDs are still pretty expensive. A few years ago, they were $40 or $50. A couple of months ago, I saw them for $13 at one of the building supply stores. Somebody told us that there were 2 for $10 at Costco's. Still kind of pricey, but they're coming way down. That is where we're headed. All right, so we're going to turn these light bulbs around. So those on the other side, if anybody needs to get up and move around, you can. But which one of these bulbs do you think is using the most energy?
The white one on your side.
On the left? Okay. Too obvious. Somebody smells a rat. Too obvious. Okay. One on this side is the compact fluorescent. They come in different colors today. This one is a bright white. And when I first installed compact fluorescents in my home, I thought they were too white. I was more used to the soft, the little yellow tint we've been grown accustomed to with the incandescents. Today, you can get dimmable compact fluorescents. That was an issue when they first came out as well. And you can get different colors. But let's see which one of these is using the most energy and which one, and if it's any significance to it. All right, Kim, would you please tell us how many watts this compact fluorescent is using? 16 watts. Great. How about this regular incandescent? 55. Thank you so much. That's pretty significant, isn't it? Thank you so much for that third-party verification. All right. See, because I can tell you anything, or just read anything out of the book, right? Okay, Wellerly has a question.
About those energy efficient lights, because the power was sending those concerns for everyone to use those. So I use them, but they gave me a headache every time.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how efficient that would be for everybody, those energy efficient lights.
Okay, Wellerly, we appreciate that comment, but she said that she didn't like the free ones that Duke Energy sent out, and they were not inside a bulb like that. They were just the little pigtail bulbs, and I can appreciate that because they have come a long ways. Since then, yes, they have, and we look forward to eventually being with LED lights. Do you have any other questions at this point? Yes, sir.
Back earlier, I was looking at these green features on page 16.
Yes, Troy.
Why is a closed loop system for geothermal on there and not a typical open?
Okay, Troy, that's a great question. Troy asked about a geothermal HVAC system, and certainly anything we can do to improve our HVAC is checked in the plus column. And a few years ago, we went from air conditioners, a minimum SEER level, SEER, seasonal energy efficient ratio of 10, up to a 13. And furnaces today, the minimum is an 80% efficient furnace, meaning at least 80% of that fuel is being used to heat with, no more than 20% being exhausted out. You can go as high as 90 or 95% efficient. SEER rating of air conditioners, you can go as far as 21 or 22. But the most efficient HVAC systems that are out there for residential is geothermal. And that's where we're not using refrigerant to cool with. A few years ago we went from R22. We don't use that anymore. Now we use something called R410A. And it's a lot better for the environment, but nonetheless it still is refrigerant. It still has some effect on the ozone. But these geothermal systems are using water out of the ground to heat and cool with. So the water is about 55 degrees year-round, so they're able to take the cool part of that out in the summertime. In the wintertime, they take the hot part out, but it goes back to the ground to maintain that constant water temperature of 55. To do that, it costs a little more to install those systems, maybe twice as much. You either need wells or a closed loop, like what Troy was talking about. So if you don't have a well, you still have a big tank where it's big enough so that water can adjust back to the ground temperature. Sometimes, Troy, people ask us about any tax credits that may be coming up for installing green components in your home. And we tell agents to always recommend your clients go to the Department of Energy's website, because those tax credits are always certain their conditions to change, especially in election year. And by them doing just a little bit of their own due diligence on the Department of Energy's website, they'll get a lot better understanding of maybe something that's coming up, or maybe when some of these will expire. And Troy, I don't know why they didn't go into the different types of systems within the geothermal system. I think they just wanted to touch on geothermal, and we might need to go into a 4-hour green class or even a 3-day green class like the Echo Broker class to get more in depth on the different types of systems that are out there. Okay? Vince?
Yeah, I've maybe a two-part question.
Yes.
How it goes. You talked about Energy Star. Energy Star rating is an energy efficient or performance rating. Is it fair to advertise a green residence if it just has a lot of Energy Star applicable or Energy Star certified, whatever you call it? Is that fair? Are those two synonymous, being green with being Energy Star certified?
Okay, Vince, that's a great question. We appreciate it. There are certainly some other green certifications that you can have other than Energy Star, NAHB Green, LEED, there are others. And if you don't have any of those green certifications, you can still have a HERS rater come in and do all their testing and give you a HERS rating that you can put under that HERS category on your MLS sheets. Some of our builders today are not doing the certificate, but are still doing a HERS rating, showing that they are hopefully at least 15% more energy efficient than just a code built test. So yes, you can do that part. And we have 2 green categories in our area, green certification or HERS rating. You can do the HERS rating without doing the green category, absolutely. Great question, appreciate you asking it. Yes,
On the
Richard.
video, the product, the foil line product that we had in the attic that produces the interior at a temperature of about 30 degrees. My question basically is, what effect does that have on being able to dissipate that heat inside that attic airspace? What does that affect the shingles on your house? If you've got a 25, 30-year warranty on those, what's that going to do? Because it's obviously going to overheat.
That's a great question, Richard, and a lot of people have asked that question in this class. By having the radiant barrier, that foil backing on the roof deck, does that have any effect on the longevity of the roof shingles? And we're told by our energy auditors and by our building scientists that no, it does not have any effect on the roof shingles. And it is remarkable, I tell you from personal experience, the difference in the heat in that attic in the summertime. Now, it's always less expensive to install something during new construction. It's just easier because that foil comes already applied to your sheathing from the factory. But we have talked to some people that have installed it after the fact, and in those cases, some of them have installed it to the roof decking from the inside of the attic, and some of them it's been laid out over the insulation in the attic. And both of them say that both applications, the people that have had those, have said that there's been an improvement. Yes, sir.
Is there a product similar that would be a liquid product that you can apply as opposed to a fixed product like the panels?
Okay.
A spray application, something of that nature, or a roller application, that would do the same.
For the radiant barriers. Okay, it's a great question. Is there a liquid application? I have heard people talk about some paints with some qualities within that application, but I'm not that familiar with them. If you want to get with me after class, give me a card. I'll be happy to call one of our perforators or locally that may have more information and find out for you. Okay,
I
right.
think there are some roof product was there which you can apply it like a silver coating on the top of the roof and then reflect back some heat.
Okay.
That was like around 5 years ago when I was in commercial business. I seen it and we applied it on the roof and it kind of makes a lot of difference.
Okay, Yogi, appreciate that comment. Yogi told us that they make an application that you can apply on top of the roof deck if you're switching the roof covering out. So when you remove those old shingles, you can put it on the outside part of the roof deck before you reapply shingles, and that has a good effect.
It's not a single, basically a roll.
Okay.
Normally, we don't like a residential, but like for the commercial, where you use like a big rolls,
Okay.
and you just apply the silver coating on top of those rolls.
Good. Thanks, Yogi. Anybody else?
I have a friend who has a company for installing insulation, and the insulation is supposed to be more breathable, better for the environment. Does that make it greener than the regular insulation, or not?
So Maribel tells us that a friend of yours has installed a type of insulation that breathes better.
They have a company, and it's supposed to be not made out of the material that normal,
So maybe instead of being made of fiberglass, it's made of recycled cellulose. Like that's a great use. That's a great use for recycled Charlotte newspapers. That's where we see most of the cellulose in our market made out of, and it's great because they get the material for free. They pay the Boy Scouts a little bit on their paper drives to round it all up, but it gives us an opportunity to recycle something and make insulation out of it. So that is certainly considered a green activity by recycling the material and making it into something very good. And by the way, y'all, they tell us that in attics, it's best to have blown insulation as opposed to bats. And appreciate you bringing this up, Maribel, because it reminds me to talk about this subject. But either way, it's better to have blown insulation as opposed to bats. Bats have some seams in between those bats that would allow some energy to escape, where blown gives a more thorough blanket. They say that blown cellulose and blown fiberglass are both neck and neck. They're both very good insulators for putting over the ceiling. But it's most important to have that blown as opposed to bats. In our area, we have to have an R30 value for a new home, and that gives us a 12-inch blown bat. Just north of us, Mooresville and above, they have to have an R38 as a minimum blown bat, and that's a 15-inch bat. Let me ask you this. If a home, don't get me wrong, I love existing homes as well. I was made in 1964, and hey, I'm still functioning for the purpose intended. We've talked a lot about new construction and what's going on with new construction, but there are certainly things that we can do to existing homes. If we're have a home that's built back when I was made, mid-60s, and you've never added any insulation to that attic, how much insulation do you think's up there today?
Just a little bit.
It's probably falling off very bad.
Very little half.
Pretty flat.
What would it cost to bring that, let's just say it's hardly any, but to bring 1,000 square feet of attic space from hardly any insulation up to a nice R30 12-inch bat of blown insulation? What do you think? 400, 3,500?
So they install?
1,000.
Install, blown in. Well, yourself or a contractor. We hear 400, 3,500. Most of the people that when we
200.
talk to Lowe's about renting the equipment or even using a local contractor, we've heard anywhere from $300 to $500. Maybe $300 if you rent the equipment and do it yourself. Maybe $500 if you hire a contractor. It's the easiest place in the house to install that insulation, and the truck sits out in the driveway. You just got a hose and you're just able to blow it in. But we've had some people that have taken this class and they've gone back and done that project themselves. Then they've called me and I said, well, did you seal the holes where all the electrical wires penetrated the top plates of the walls from the attic? Because that gives you the perfect opportunity to do that. And they go, oh, God, we didn't do that. And they're ready to go back and rake that insulation out of the way. And the home was made back when I was made. If you have any recessed lights, they're probably not made to have anything in contact. The lights back then would overheat if they were completely covered up. Today, our lights are ATIC. They're airtight and made to have stuff in contact. So before you do any green project, it's very important that you get some advice from a professional. We've seen a lot of people make some mistakes, and somebody like Sam with Performance Point would be a good one to contact, but we've heard great feedback from Duke Energy. They do free energy audits. The book says be careful in the fox guard the hen house, but nonetheless, I'm all about exhausted and free first. You with me? Yeah. Let's move on to our next chapter. We can come back and answer any further questions on green later. But in the process of working with the Real Estate Commission to help design this chapter on green, one of the attorneys at the commission asked if I would do a home inspection for a home they were purchasing down there in Raleigh. And we love to make friends with regulators, but you've got to be very careful, make sure you're on your toes and you do a real good job, right? So we did agree to do this home inspection, and we went down there on a Sunday. I met another inspector in Raleigh that works for us, whose wife recently was transferred to Raleigh. And so on a Sunday morning, this lady showed up, and we did her home inspection there. And hey, she was buying a house made back in the mid-'60s, about the time I was. So it's great. It's a beautiful part of town. It was close to a lot of activities she enjoyed doing uptown. And in the process of doing this inspection, this issue of codes and permits and things like that kept coming up. And I said, well, Tricia, there's been a lot of discussion in Charlotte about building codes, winter permits required. And we understand that some agents have gotten in trouble and been disciplined by the Real Estate Commission for doing major projects without pulling these permits that are required. And I was doing a home inspection for the husband for one of the bigs in South Charlotte that manages a 100-plus agent office. And that day I was doing the inspection. She had purchased 2,000 square feet, but she had finished the basement and she was selling 4,000 square feet a few years later. Turned out the seller was also the listing agent. And we were doing that inspection. I was looking at the basement floor, and I remember seeing how beautiful the floor was. I kind of did a second take to realize, hey, that's not tile, it's actually paint. Somebody done a very good job of painting this floor. So when I'm checking the receptacles around the wall, none of them are on GFCI. I'm like, well, how did the county miss that? But then I walked through the rear utility wall to the utility room, and when I walked through, I see that there's no insulation all the way down this wall. And concrete for the foundation wall, that does not constitute insulation. So I'm like, well, how did the county miss this? And then 2 or 3 other things, and I called the buyer's agent over, and I said, man, the county missed a bunch of stuff when she did this major remodel a few years back. And he said, well, hold on, Arvil. He pulled out his iPad, he just punched in the address. The home was located in Mecklenburg County, so he went to a website called mecpermit.com, but most all of the municipalities have their own website today. And so he punched in the address for this property, this mecpermit.com, and he said, Arvil, there's been no permits issued on this home. He said, not in at least the last 6 years, because they're required to keep records of any permits for at least 6 years. And they can purge it after 6 years. Some municipalities are purging those after 6 years, but they're required to keep them for at least 6 years. He said, well, hold on, let me go to the tax information, because all of you have access to tax information. It's on the MLS sheet. And so he looked it up on the tax information. He said, Arvil, the tax office still has it listed as 2,000 square feet. So I was just talking to him. I didn't want to get the buyer upset. And he said, Arvil, I think it's time we talk to the listing agent, the seller, and find out what's going on. So he called the seller over there and asked her about it, and she looked like a deer in the headlights. She was just shocked, and she thought she was going to end up in this quarterly bulletin with the Real Estate Commission, She thought all the ladies in her Sunday school class were going to find out about it. And we said, hold on, slow down, don't go into cardiac arrest on us or anything. All you need to do is contact the county. You can self-report yourself. They're aware that a lot of this is going on. And when I've spoken with the county, they've even said, Arvil, look, we're just as much responsible for some of this as these owners, because during our building boom, sometimes we almost non-verbally just suggested, don't sweat the small stuff, we're too busy. So they told her she could self-report, and she was able to do that and bring it up to code and able to move on and sell a good product. Okay? So a lot of people get upset about this building code stuff. And moving forward today, everybody gets a prayer for judgment. We just want to talk about moving forward because we've probably all been involved in one of these scenarios at one point in time. And Sandy promised there would be no paddy wagon outside after today's class, so still feel free to ask questions. Okay? You know, in September 2011, there was an article in the NAR magazine talking about don't forget the permit. Anytime you do a remodel, you've got to remember to get this permit. Okay? North Carolina is divided into 100 counties. And within those 100 counties, we have 540 cities, towns, and villages. But there are as many as 600 different inspection districts. That's because, well, in Mecklenburg County, everything's handled under the county level. In many of the other counties, the county may do part of the inspection work, and the different cities may do part of that inspection work. But the one thing that the Real Estate Commission wants to get across to us today is that unless we have any licensed attorneys in the room, and do we have any licensed attorneys today? Do we have any currently employed building code officials? Okay, then none of us are qualified to interpret building codes. Building codes are general statutes, and one thing we should always say is call your local municipality. All right? One of my friends just had a toilet installed in their home, and they were saying, Arvil, does this require a permit? And we'll cover that in a little bit, because there are a lot of different scenarios. And this broker in charge, after her husband, after we'd done this inspection for him and ran into this issue where the seller was a listing agent and she had done this major remodel, she said, Arvil, can you do a sales meeting type presentation on when exactly are permits required? And so, you know, being a home inspector, I'm not a licensed attorney or a currently employed building code official, but we should all know a little bit about permits, building codes, things like that. So I put together a little presentation for a sales meeting, but before I did it, I went down to Mecklenburg County because I wanted them to take a look at it so I knew that I was giving correct information. And they did recommend that we make a few minor changes, but in the sales meeting presentation, we presented it as a quiz, a 19-question quiz. We gave everybody the opportunity to answer yes, no, maybe yes, maybe no on whether or not a permit will be required for that type of repair or renovation, and provided for some very good discussion. And in a little bit, you will have the opportunity to take that quiz. Okay? One thing you want to know is who did the work. Were they licensed or not? And some listing agents still feel like a handyman can do everything. And we're fine with a handyman doing a lot of activities. What we want is to make sure that these people, if they're qualified, that they pull the permits. Handyman can do structural repairs, but you have to pull the permit. HVAC, electrical, plumbing, it needs to be a licensed contractor, and you need to make sure they pull the permits. Ultimately, it is always the homeowner's responsibility to know that a permit was pulled. Okay? It is our duty as real estate agents to discover and disclose any material facts. Now, how would you just know that there was a material fact there? I would say if the MLS sheet says there's 4,000 square feet and the tax sheet says there's 2,000 square feet, that might be an indication that there's a material fact, a red flag that would indicate that something's going on. How about if it's just 500 feet difference and they're talking about how nice it's been to have this bonus room finished? Things like that are going to be easy for you to find. So let's turn to page 29 and go through this 19-question quiz. And no matter what you make on the quiz, we're going to allow you to, there's going to be no third-party verification. You get to self-score yourself today. And no matter what you did on the quiz, you're still going to get a certificate at 5:30 today, all right? Great. So how about it? Go through them. I'm going to stop by and check on a few of you, and then we'll go over these questions in a few minutes. Kim, I know you're going to do great. Melanie is speeding down through there. Yes, you doing all right? Good. You'll know in a few minutes, huh? do is check them off right away. Knock them all out. Everyone's been pretty, making 100 so far? Jim, you having a race with you? Yeah. What do you think about having a quiz? Do you think that's going to help our understanding of when permits required? Good. Dave, you doing good? You get them all so far? Yeah, yeah. Hey, there's a lot for me to learn.
Yeah.
A big learning experience for me too. Appreciate you asking that question, Troy. They just wanted to hit on geothermal briefly, I guess, with so much to cover in this mandatory update. Yeah. Exactly. Do you like that geothermal? Yeah. I need that one someday. Okay, how'd you do? Anybody make 100? All right, Derek says he made 100. Let's see. Okay. When is a permit required? It's required anytime the total project is over $5,000. It's required anytime you have structural repairs. Now remember, an unlicensed contractor can do work up to $30,000. Structural work, after that, they must be a general contractor. It is a violation of North Carolina general statutes. It's a misdemeanor criminal offense if you do not pull a required building permit. You could also have tax consequences, like this lady was getting ready to, or had to go through, get resolved with her 2,000 versus her 4,000 square foot home. Also, when you get a chance, go home and look at your homeowner's policy. I bet in the exclusions, because I know mine does, it says that if I don't pull the permit, they're not going to cover it should there be a major a problem, a fire or a flood or something like that where we needed to use that insurance. For any of you that are actively in general brokerage, look at your home warranty that you're selling to customers. I bet you your home warranty may cover this issue of whether or not there are permits full. Now, some people say, well, isn't that expensive? So we asked Mecklenburg County how much they charge for their permits, and for the first $3,000 worth of work, it's $62.85. For each additional $1,000 worth of work, it's $12.85. When we've talked to some of the surrounding counties, outside the city, it's even less than that. Okay? Sometimes people end up spending more money by not pulling these permits. And today, a lot of the renovation type work can be done just by going online. We are asked, well, can homeowners do work themselves even though they're not licensed? And absolutely they can. There's something called this homeowner's exemption. And I remember when I was in general brokerage up at Lake Norman, sometimes people would buy a lot and they'd want to build their own house. And they could do this as long as they intended on living in that home for at least 12 months. It's all about intention. Do you plan to live in it for 12 months. Now, a few years ago, a seller that had a sign in their yard might still plan on being in that house for 12 months, but not in this market. A home seller does not qualify for homeowner's exemption, especially if it says SOLD across that real estate sign. Once you pull the permit, you're having the work done. If it's a licensed contractor, they don't have to be present for the inspection. That's something you may want to discuss if you're in the process of working something out with the contractor. I know my fiance, for instance, works at Bank of America. And the contractor said, well, if you make me pull the permit, it's going to be another $500. And she said, well, I work at Bank of America. I'm allowed to work from home 2 days a week, so I'll be there the day the inspector's there. So I guess that's $500 we can strike off this estimate, right? Remember, if the homeowner is exercising that right of exemption, they must be there no matter what. If the work's done inside, outside, because the work's done outside, you use a licensed contractor, nobody would have to be there. But the municipalities want the unlicensed homeowner exercising a right of exemption to always be there, because so often they've had to explain too many times why somebody did not pass that inspection, even a second or a third time. So let's get to our quiz. Is a permit required when adding a window or a door?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. That's right, because you're changing the structure. Anytime if you're having to make that hole larger to add another window, you're changing the structure, and as we said, any structural repairs require permitting. How about if you're just replacing some windows or doors? No?
It's over 5,000.
Maribel says, hold on, wait a minute. If it's over $5,000, it requires permitting. That's absolutely right, Maribel. If it's over $5,000, or if you're having to make that hole larger to fit in a larger door or window, therefore you'll be changing that structure, at that point it's going to require a permit. Okay, how about when replacing damaged like-kind siding? Vicki Home Inspector wrote up this house that it had masonite, and everywhere it butted into a window or door or the roof covering, places like that, it had damaged siding, and in the repair negotiations, your client has agreed to replace that siding. Would that require a permit? No? Y'all are catching on. Yes, if it's over $5,000, but if it's like-kind siding, hopefully that would not require a permit. All right, what if you're going to change the type of siding? You know what, Arvil, I'm not going to go back with that masonite. That's what got us there. I hear real good things about this cement fiberboard. We're going to go back with cement fiberboard, or we're just going to wrap it with vinyl. Would that require a permit? All right, we've got a real smart group in here today. Yes, if it's over 5K, definitely. Glenn, you had a question?
Yeah, what determines the 5K? Is that materials and labor, an estimate, or is it just materials?
Okay, Glenn has a good question. We appreciate that. What determines the $5,000? Is it materials? Is it labor? Is it both? And Glenn, I think the answer to that would be both. And somebody up in Cabarrus County the other day asked us, what if we do $4,900 one month, we do $4,900 the next month? And I said, you better call your local municipality. Be careful with this issue on changing the type of siding. What if they went back with brick or hard cut stucco or stone, and they just assumed because you said it was okay, as long as it's under $5,000, it'd be all right? Well, those three systems all require a structural component in order to be able to switch over to that type of system. So you have to be careful when we talk about something all-encompassing. How about taking out an interior non-load-bearing wall? My fiance lives right down the street over here in Barkley Downs. She's got a house built back when I was made, and I love it. It's a beautiful lot, a nice home, and she wanted to take out a wall so that her kitchen was more open to the living room. And she said, Arvil, it's non-load-bearing because my daddy said it was non-load-bearing. I got to be real careful when she throws the daddy card, you know. But can you do that without pulling a permit?
Oh, yes, you can. It's not.
How do you tell if it's non-load bearing?
Yeah, you can do that. You can do it as long as it's not.
Carol, you've got a question back there in the back?
No, I would just say that you would have to, because typically you're not gonna have a wall without electrical, so that would be my thing, you would need a permit for that.
It's just cosmetic.
Because if you're changing.
Carol brings up a very good point, because Because there's several different issues we're looking at when we start talking about non-load bearing walls. First of all, how do you really know it's non-load bearing? Really, you have to look at the blueprints to tell for sure. Some walls that look like they're load bearing, in fact, just have load points. Okay? And I looked at a house the other day, a seller called and had some questions because one of our inspectors had written up that there was a scar across the ceiling and a corresponding one across the floor where it looked like they'd taken a wall out, and he said this wall is not load bearing. So it's a ranch home, it's about 50 feet long, about 38 feet wide, and I said, well, it's been a long time since I've seen a ceiling joist span 38 feet, but given the benefit of the doubt, I would go up there and pull back the insulation and look, and sure enough, those two ceiling joists were scabbed across, and there's nothing there to hold where they met. But it really doesn't matter because any demolition requires a permit. So forget about this non-load bearing part. And any wall that sticks out more than 18 inches, like Carol was saying, has to have a receptacle. So you see where we can get in trouble if we're thinking one way, but in fact there are other issues that are involved. And all too often we can get caught assuming just by taking that question, and then in fact there are other issues involved. How about when removing or replacing, installing a disappearing staircase? Would that require a permit?
Yes.
Yes? No?
Oh,
Because my brother up in Asheville did this not long ago, and he's a CPA, and boy, he really counts his beans. He has 3 children in school, and his wife stays at home and helps take care of those children. He's very financially acute. And so he wanted a disappearing staircase because they do use that attic space to store winter and summer clothes and holiday ornaments, and he goes up and down through there a lot, and he wanted easier access. So he went to Lowe's and bought one of these disappearing staircases, and he came home and he looked through his Maxwell House can to find his straightest fasteners, and he realized he didn't have any 16-penny fasteners left. So he said, well, I'll just go with 10 pennies. He said, everywhere they ask for 1/16, instead I'll install 2 10 pennies. 10 and 10 is 20, so I should be okay. What do you think about that? And he said, it's rated for 280 pounds, but I only weigh 160 pounds. But what about when he sells that home and the new owner does weigh closer to 200 pounds, like myself, or even up to as far as that staircase is rated? A broken arm, a broken leg, or even worse, somebody's wishing you would have pulled that $50, $60 permit. Yes, any structural work requires a permit. So how about when adding a deck?
no, because it doesn't have a roof.
Mary Bell?
Structural.
Yes.
Okay,
Structural.
most everybody says yes. And I am even more concerned with this area right here where it butts in against the house. Because when doing inspections, I can tell you that it's all too often we found where there's major damage, where water's come through, it wasn't flashed properly, and you've got this moisture damage or termite infestation on that band sill, and think, gosh, why didn't they just buy that permit, this third-party verification from the county to make sure that it was installed properly, as opposed to having this, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 repair sometime later. Up in Cornelius, we have a lot of people that built decks up there around the lake, and this was a real hot topic with them. And because a lot of their work has been on weekends over the years, and they didn't realize that you had to have a permit.
What if it's not
Yes,
attached
Sandy.
to the house? What if it's not attached to the house, but it's like a gazebo type deck away from the house?
Sandy says, what if it's not attached to the house? That's a great question, Sandy. If the deck's adjacent to the house but not attached, you still have to have a permit. If you bought one of those little outbuildings from Lowe's or Home Depot, or you're building a gazebo, you need to call your local municipality and find out what they require. Appreciate that question, Sandy. So yes, any structural system requires to be full permit. What if you're just replacing the steps to that deck or porch? Would that require a permit?
No.
Just replacing some steps.
Replacing is for adding is needed.
Putting the
Okay, so this group over here says, nah, not just the steps. What do y'all think? Carol back there is shaking. Okay, me too.
it has to be certain.
Okay, you see where we can get some difference in opinions and ideas on this? And I learned a lot just by helping to design this chapter. Because the fact of the matter is that any structural system requires you to have a permit. And let me tell you what happened to us a few weeks ago. A buyer's agent we've worked with for about 10 years called me and said, Arvil, do you have a copy of that home inspection you did 14 months ago? She gave me an address. And I said, well, I'm sure we do, because we're required by law to keep copies of our inspections for at least 3 years. I said, well, why do you need it? And she said, well, you got a real good color picture in there where when y'all did the inspection, you showed that one of the risers on a set of exterior steps was 1.5 inches higher than the rest of those risers. Before you did the inspection, when I was just showing that property, I tripped over that riser and I hurt my hip. Now, 14 months later, both hips, I'm having a lot of difficulty with both hips. My physician says it's due to that trauma when I tripped over those steps. I've never sued anybody in my life, but I talked to my attorney, and she said, you're crazy if you don't sue. We can get you the money for those 2 hip replacements. That was over 1 step. I bet somebody's wishing they'd have pulled that permit. But how about if we're just installing hardwood floors, but the price gets over $5,000? Let's say $7,000 of hardwood floors. Would that require a permit? Okay, now today, and remember the main focus here is why it's so important to always give advice to your clients to call your local municipality. And today, for this course, for the reason of this course, we're only looking at single-family structures. I tell you that commercial, when you're doing work to a commercial building, just about everything requires a permit. Carpet, replacing this carpet for a commercial building would require a permit. However, floor coverings, paint, wallpaper, draperies, window treatments for residential structures do not require a permit. Okay? It's not covered. How about when remodeling a kitchen? Would that require a permit? All right, let me give you an example. A young couple goes to IKEA a few weekends ago and purchases a base cabinet. They come home and they put it on the wall, on the other side of the refrigerator, screw it to the wall. So now that it's attached, it's real property. Would that require a permit?
No.
Okay, Mary Bell, but I asked them, I said, well, what are you going to use it for? They said, well, we need somewhere to put our coffee maker. I said, well, that's good. Everybody needs a coffee maker. I know I appreciate mine, but how are you going to energize it? And they said, well, we're just going to run the cord behind the refrigerator to a receptacle on the other side. Anytime you have a base cabinet, you must have a receptacle over it. And again, you see how tricky this stuff can be? You know, when you install that receptacle, you have to bring all the receptacles in that kitchen or bathroom up to today's code. Because we just started using GFCI receptacles in 1975 in the bathrooms. And that was when you ladies quit using the bonnets and the curlers in the living room, started bringing all that electrical equipment into the bathroom. And in case you accidentally drop a curling iron or a hair dryer into the bathtub, your husband might get a little buzz, but he's not going to be recycling, okay? That worked out well. So in the mid-'80s, they said we're going to start requiring GFCI receptacles within 6 feet of the kitchen sinks. In the mid-'90s, they said all the over-the-counter receptacles are going to have to be on GFCI. So remember that if you add one receptacle, you bring all of them up to today's code. How about a bathroom? If you're remodeling a bathroom, would that require a permit?
Yes.
Kind of like a kitchen. It's going to be hard to get very far with the bathroom, isn't it? All right. A good rule of thumb for bathrooms and for kitchens regarding the plumbing is if you have to go beyond the shutoff valves underneath the kitchen sink, that's going to require a permit. Or if you go beyond the trap or the drain lines, that's going to require a permit. There is an exception on toilets. A toilet has a built-in trap, and yes, you are allowed to replace the toilet without pulling a permit. But be real careful, because some people don't realize that wax seal between the bottom flange of the toilet and the top flange for that plumbing drain pipe, that helps to keep these sewer gases out, and sewer gases can be dangerous. Yes, Anna?
So what if you have your piping replaced under the house, the plumbing, do the plumbing come with it?
All right, good question, Anna. We appreciate that. What if you replace the piping under the house? Well, anytime you're replacing water supply lines or drain pipes, that requires a permit. Too often, our contractors do not pull them if we do not ask them about it. So ultimately, people who ask, well, isn't that the contractor's responsibility? And yes, it's their responsibility to their licensure law, but to your home, it is your responsibility to see that they got one. So Anna, I appreciate you asking that question. That's a great question because anytime you're getting work like that done, it's important that you call the local municipality if you have any questions to find out. Yes, Sandy?
Can I just have my handyman change that toilet? Do I have to have a permit? Does that homeowner exemption apply, if, about the not doing it, not having a permit? Does that mean I have to do it, or do I have to have a licensed plumber do it, or?
Okay, that's a great question, Sandy, because if you're going to exercise your homeowner's exemption, and if you're going to do something that requires a permit, some municipalities require you to come down and take a knowledge exam on your plumbing or your electrical or your HVAC, where you want to do your own work. And they require you to come down and take that knowledge exam, not your handyman. Okay? And they expect you to make that replacement, not somebody else, if you're exercising that homeowner's exemption. How about if you're replacing a like kind water heater, and they define like kind as same size, same location, same fuel, electric or gas, and same venting material?
No.
Would that require a permit?
Yes.
Can my handyman do that one?
Not even.
Can my handyman do that one? Or do
Okay.
I have to
Sandy,
get on
Sandy's
that
going to get
bus?
that handyman involved. We've got a lot of yes or no's coming across.
Are you gonna send me to jail?
Then nobody goes to jail after today's class. Everybody gets prayer for judgment today. Here's the deal. If it is a like kind, same size, same location, same fuel, same venting, and you're working with a licensed plumbing contractor, they do not have to pull a permit. But that homeowner exercising their right of exemption will have to pull a permit to install a like kind water heater. We have seen a lot of homeowners make some pretty big mistakes with water heaters. You've all seen a direct vent water heater that kind of elbows directly out of the garage. And those are very expensive. We've seen a lot of homeowners try to replace those with a regular water heater where the vent pipe goes straight up, through the ceiling, up through the attic. You've got a potential problem out there. And so often when we're doing inspections, we see that gas water heater, sitting on top of an 18-inch stand, and that's usually where they store all their paint and flammables, right?
Yeah.
How about if you're just adding a water purification system? Would that require a permit?
No. I would vote for
No, probably. Remember, Mary Bell, I know this one may seem a little silly to you, but we're cutting into that main water supply line. That requires a permit. Anytime you cut into that main water supply line, it's going to require a permit. And the big thing is we don't want you to get in a position where it's my agent said this, my agent said that. Your agent, everybody in this room said call your local municipality. How about if you're adding an electrical outlet or light? Okay, the National Electrical Code suggests that would require a permit. However, the North Carolina General Assembly met and said we are not going to require our licensed electrical contractors to pull a permit when they're just replacing a like kind receptacle or a like kind light. A homeowner exercising that right of exemption will have to pull one. But how about if you're replacing a light fixture or receptacle?
Make sure it's a license.
You are like, yes.
Or unless you're doing it yourself.
Does that cover the same
Okay,
exemption?
same thing. They're not going to require it for just replacing. They're not going to require a licensed electrical contractor to pull that permit. Okay. But how about for installing a ceiling fan to an existing junction box? You buy one of these nice Energy Star homes, and they have all these different options. And they want $300 for ceiling fans, and Madeline says, I can get those at Lowe's for $95. I'll hold off on that. 2 years goes by, and now Madeline wants her ceiling fans. She puts them on her honey-do list, and would that require a permit?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
No.
No?
Unless you're doing it yourself.
But you
Yeah,
add
that's
to
what it
the
is.
junction box.
Carol, you had a question back there?
But I was gonna state that most lights, when they're built, it's a regular light box, and then you have to have a different box to hold ceiling fan.
Okay, we appreciate that, Carol. Carol brought up the fact that there are 3 different kinds of junction box. Some of them are on a little plastic junction box that's made just for a light. Some of them are a metal junction box made for something heavier, like a chandelier. And this if it's for a ceiling fan, it's probably metal, plus it also will have 2 arms that stretch in between the 2 ceiling joists. And the Romex wire sheathing for a regular light would have 3 wires in the middle, and for a ceiling fan, it has to have 4. But even if that builder says it's pre-wired for a ceiling fan, typically you have 3 electrical inspections for a home. In the very beginning, They inspect the soft surface out of the street. And then they do a pre-drywall rough-in electrical inspection. Then they do a final electrical inspection. What are they inspecting in that final inspection?
So that kind of equipment is attached with like outlets, main points electrically. Because when you
You
putting
can have
a
it wait.
regular ceiling light and regular fan, you have to have a structural glasses, and if you don't have it, you cannot do the weight.
Okay, Yogi reminds us that during that final inspection, they're gonna be looking at all the appliances and fixtures to make sure that we installed all those correctly. All right, how about when adding an attic fan?
Yeah, it has to have it wait.
Let's think about this one, and we'll come back and cover it after break. And so everybody be back in 10 minutes.